In episode 1 of Dark Matter, you get introduced to Dr. Jason Dessen. He's a physics professor living in Chicago with his wife, Daniela, and their son, Charlie. And for the most part, they live a normal life. He goes to work, he teaches class to students that don't really care. Charlie's 15, so he's just learning how to drive, and Daniela is a former artist who now works in an art gallery. For the most part, their life is boring, yet it's everything he wants. While Charlie's driving to school and Jason's in the passenger seat, Jason gets a phone call from his buddy Ryan. They're old college buddies, and Ryan's got great news. He won a prestigious award called the Pavia. With it comes $1 million, grant money. It is a massive deal in the field. And while Jason is thrilled for his buddy, he's also a little jealous. You can see it on his face, because he thought he probably could have won the Pavia award. And even Ryan admits it should have went to you, but what Ryan wants to do is celebrate that night, and he wants his buddy there with him. Jason's got to get this whole Pavia award thing off his brain because after dropping Charlie off at school, he needs to get to class. That day's lesson is going to be on radioactivity in a box and this whole idea of something called the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics. It's way too complicated for me to understand, but it hypothesizes that the thing inside the box is neither alive or dead. It's deciding what to do. I'm not going to bore you with the details because the kids seem bored enough. Later that night, Jason heads home, and it's family night, something they do every single week. But then Jason's phone starts blowing up a little bit, and Daniela notices that it's Ryan, and she knows Ryan. And she asks what's going on, and Jason has to tell her that Ryan won the Pavia award. He wants to hang out, but Jason doesn't want to go because it's, quote, family night. And Daniela implores him to go. She realizes he's probably being mopey, but she also knows that he needs to be there for his friend because his friend would be there for him if the roles were reversed. So even though Jason wants to use every excuse in the book, he ends up heading out to the bar, which isn't too far away, and saying goodbye to Daniela and Charlie for the night. When he arrives at this bar, he says hello to the bartender, who he knows because he goes to this bar quite a bit, and then he runs into the party. He's got to put on a facade and act like he's happy for Ryan, and in a way he is. He just wishes in that moment that he was Ryan, the successful neurologist who's getting compliments left and right. As the night dies down, Ryan and Jason head to a corner of the bar and they start exchanging old stories and laughing, but eventually Ryan goes, there is a reason why I asked you here, and it's not just to do a trip down memory lane. Remember Andrew Darab? And Jason remembers Andrew Darab from college. He was a little pretentious, but Ryan says, well, he and I have about $100 million in our war chest, and after today it's going to triple. We're going to start a neurotech company, and I want you to be a part of it. Now, the catch is it's in San Francisco, and Jason's life is in Chicago. So he tells his friend, I'll think about it, but I don't know. And Ryan asks him to go home, talk it over with Daniela, and get back to him the next day. When Jason leaves the bar, he's a little drunk. He starts stumbling home. But when he's not more than a few blocks from his house, he gets held up at gunpoint by a masked assailant. Initially, the guy asks for his phone, but then he tells him to get in his car. The masked man gets in the back seat, and at gunpoint, he instructs Jason to drive. While Jason's driving, the masked man is able to figure out the passcode to his phone, which is really bizarre because the passcode is Jason's father's birthday in reverse. It's really tough to guess. He then asks Jason, what did you and Ryan talk about? And Jason's a little flummoxed at all of this, how the masked man knew who Ryan was, but he tells him he offered me a job. He's starting a neurotech company in San Francisco. I didn't give him an answer. The masked man then instructs Jason to take an exit, and they get to an empty warehouse. And once Jason gets out of the car, he's thrown on the ground, and the masked man takes his wedding ring. He then instructs Jason to take all of his clothes off, and then he tells him to walk. And Jason's going a little slow, so the guy hits him in the face, and Jason ends up tumbling down a bunch of stairs, cutting up his face pretty good. With Jason on the ground, this guy stabs a needle into his neck, full of something. Jason starts asking the guy, what did you give me? But the guy doesn't answer. He just tells Jason to go open a bag, and it's full of clothes. And he says, get dressed. You'll be unconscious soon. Jason does as he's told, and he does start losing consciousness. But he's also asking the guy questions that the guy's not answering. He's literally just sitting there waiting for Jason to lose all consciousness. And while he's waiting, he opens up this little tiny device. It actually looks like a Nintendo DS in a way. And when Jason asks him, what is that? The guy just tells him it's a possibility. Jason's a few seconds away from losing all consciousness, and that's when the masked man walks up to him and asks, "Are you happy with your life? Or have you ever wondered what else could have been?" And Jason says, "I sometimes wonder." And the guy tells him, "Good. Hold on to that. You're going to be scared, but you can make it yours. And you can have everything that you missed out on. I am sorry, but I'm doing this for us." And Jason asks him, "Who are you?" But the guy tells him, "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." Jason passes out, and the next thing he knows, he's being woken up by a bunch of doctors. And he asks, "Where am I? I want to go home." But the doctors tell him, "You are home." They start putting him through a quarantine process. They put clothes on him he doesn't recognize. They put him in a room he doesn't recognize. Jason is so confused at everything. Eventually, a woman walks in, and she looks very relieved to see Jason. She gives him a hug. She's happy he's back. But the thing is, Jason doesn't recognize her. And it's clear to Jason that this woman thinks she knows him, but he doesn't know who she is. Amanda, realizing that he doesn't know who she is, introduces herself and says that they'll figure this out, but the good news is he's been all cleared from quarantine. Jason's even more confused than he already was, so Amanda takes him to one of her colleagues. It's a guy named Leighton Vance, and Jason actually does recognize Leighton Vance, but he hasn't seen him in years. When Jason asks Leighton, "What is this?" Leighton just tells him it's your triumph. And then they start going through a debriefing process that's recorded. Amanda starts off by identifying all parties involved on the video. She's Amanda Lucas, she's the lab psychiatrist. Leighton Vance is the CEO, and then there's Jason. He's the chief science officer and the co-founder of this company that he doesn't even recognize. And that's when the glass gets really clear because everybody has shown back up to welcome Jason back. Jason coming back to this area is a big deal for a lot of people. Everybody, it seems like, except Jason, who's very confused at all of this. Leighton informs Jason that the reason why everyone's here is because he's the only one who's returned so far. And then he asks him, "Do you have any sense of how long you were gone?" Jason's face is still confused, so Amanda answers the question for him. He was apparently gone for 14 months and 10 days. Leighton then says, "We know you're exhausted, but could you tell us a little bit about where you've been? What you saw, how you made it back? What was the last thing you remember?" The last thing Jason remembers was being at the bar. And he starts reiterating this to Amanda and Leighton. But the more that Leighton and Amanda question Jason, the more he gets frustrated until finally he just snaps and says, "I want to go home. I don't recognize any of this. I haven't seen you in a decade. I don't know who she is." So they stop the recording and they start escorting Jason to another room. And Leighton tells him, "We're going to get you settled for the night. We need to monitor your vitals, track your progress towards regaining your memories." But when Jason sees an opening to escape, he takes it. He runs to an elevator, he takes it upstairs, and he gets the hell out of there. And he realizes that this building that he's in is outside the city. So he starts walking towards the city. But as he's doing so, he is being chased because these people aren't just about to let him go. They've been waiting 14 months for him to come back. Once in the city, Jason hails a cab. He tells him to go to his house, but when he gets there, it's completely different. It's not at all like he remembers it. And his wife, well, she's not there, but Amanda is. And Amanda informs him, "I live here with you." He thinks it's some kind of joke, and he starts looking throughout the house, calling for Daniela, but she's not answering. And when he gets to Charlie's room isn't Charlie's room. It's an office. And that's when Jason sees that he won the Pavia Award. Amanda asks him, "Who is Daniela?" And a very frustrated Jason said, "She's my wife." At first, Amanda tries to help him, but finally she has to scream at him and say, "You don't have a wife." And that's when Jason takes off running. Now, who's the masked man? Well, it was Jason. We'll call him Jason B. And he returns to that house that the original Jason thought he was going to. When he walks inside, there's Daniela waiting for him, annoyed because he didn't answer his calls. And Jason B starts taking all of it in. He's amazed. But using the backstory that Jason A, the original Jason, gave him, he starts telling Daniela about the meeting with Ryan and how there's a job on the table, but really all he wants to do is just kiss her and be with her. And that night, Jason B has sex with Daniela, Jason A's wife. It's hot. It's steamy. As they're doing so, though, Daniela notices that Jason B's arm is bandaged up, and she asks, what happened there? And Jason B just says, you wouldn't believe it if I told you. We'll start out episode 2 with Jason A's story. After fleeing his house, he went to the bar where he met Ryan that night, but the bartender has no idea who he is. He claims he's never served Jason, even though Jason knows this guy. And he goes there all the time. The bartender is insistent, yeah, dude, I don't know you. That's when Jason starts getting worried that maybe there's something wrong with him. So he checks himself into the hospital. He tells them that he feels like there's something wrong with his mind, so they give him a scan, they put him under for the night, and they just check his vitals. When they get the results, they tell Jason that they ran a CT scan, there's no brain damage. They did run a toxicology screening, and they did find something that the doctor had never seen before. It was a psychoactive compound. That must be what the guy injected Jason with. But the big shock is when the woman says, you asked us to find your family, and there is no Daniela Dessin in all of Chicago. Same thing with Charlie Dessin. The doctor then decides to start going over the resume of Jason, and everything checks out until she says, you won the Pavi Award. And he never did. She starts showing him articles about how he went missing 14 months ago and hasn't been seen since. Nobody really thought much of it, but it seemed like he kind of disappeared off the planet. Of course, none of this ringing a bell with Jason. Jason, using the iPad that the doctor is showing him, decides to Google Daniela's maiden name, and he finds out that not only is she an artist, she's having an art gallery that day. It's the premiere of the exhibit. So he decides, after he checks himself out of the hospital, to head over. And as Jason's heading over, Leighton and Amanda are trying to find him. One of their last-ditch efforts is to contact Ryan, because Jason had mentioned that he remembered meeting up with Ryan in the bar, and they knew who he was talking about, but they haven't heard back. So the search for Jason continues. A little while later, though, Jason does arrive at the art gallery, and it takes a little bit of convincing, but he's able to find his way in. The art gallery is all about memories and taking different passages towards your future and different timelines. Jason doesn't really care about any of that. All he cares about is finding Daniela. But he is surprised because when he comes out of the art gallery to the general meeting area where the party's going on, he's all over the walls. It's as if he was the subject of this art gallery. And he doesn't remember taking any of these pictures. But all of that goes away when he finally locks eyes with Daniela. The first thing he does is ask her, where's Charlie? But Daniela says, I don't know who Charlie is. But she's so busy with everybody else at the party. She's trying to be a good party host. And she's really not picking up on the fact that Jason is very confused. But that's when he sees another familiar face show up, and it's Ryan. Although Ryan looks way different than he remembered. The conversation between the two is a little awkward. Ryan asks him, where the hell have you been? And Jason can't answer that question. So the two head over to the bar, and Ryan starts telling him all the rumors that he heard about where Jason went. Ryan then asks him, hey, how did those compounds work that I made for you a year ago? And Jason says, I don't know what you're talking about. And Ryan doesn't believe that. He says, Jay, I know you're buried amongst a bunch of NDAs, but I did a lot of work for you and Velocity all in the dark. And Velocity is the company that Jason apparently co-founded. He starts asking Ryan all about Velocity and what he knows about it, but Ryan, thinking that Jason does know all about this, is very confused with the behavior. They then get distracted because Daniela makes a speech to all the partygoers and thanks them for coming. After the party, Daniela, Ryan, and Jason all head over to Daniela's apartment. Daniela says, now that it's just the three of us, can you tell us where you've been? And Jason tries his best. He starts out with a hypothetical, hey, what if this guy woke up and then all of a sudden his house wasn't the same and his wife wasn't the same and all of that? But then it becomes obvious that he's talking about himself. He swears that he's not crazy. And he asks Daniela, all right, well, what do you remember? Anything? And what she remembers is that he randomly showed up out of the blue, saying that he had been thinking of her. And the two had their time way back in the past, and she was in love with him, but that ended. And it was Jason's decision to end it. What Jason told her that night was that their decisions create worlds, and every decision you make creates more and more and more worlds. And that in this world, the worst choice he had made was the one that he made with her, which was picking work over being in a relationship with her. They talked for a while, and he discussed his research, which was a project currently under wraps. And then he said, "You're probably never going to see me again." And she didn't until he showed up at the gallery. She then asks, "You asked, where's Charlie? Who's Charlie?" And he tells her, "It's our 15-year-old son." Ryan over here, he won the Pavia. And that's enough for Ryan. He's so frustrated with the way that Jason's acting, he just has to get out of there. And the reason is because 15 years ago, Daniela got pregnant. And the decision that was made was for Daniela to get an abortion and for Jason to go do his work. Well, that's what this world's Jason did. That's what Jason B did. Of course, Jason A, he chose the other path, to raise a family with Daniela, where one day she would abandon her own art and just work in an art gallery. And while the life wasn't exciting, it was what they wanted. Now, for Daniela and Ryan, it's really tough to accept any of that. It all sounds crazy. But Jason swears it's true. Once Ryan leaves, Daniela tells Jason, "You can stay here for the night," and the two start chatting and catching up a little bit. At one point, he says, "I don't need psychiatric help. I just need answers." So they decide to go get answers. But they need to go back to Jason's house. And in order to do that, they're going to need Amanda out of it. So the next day, they head over, both Jason and Daniela. Jason calls up Amanda and says to her, "I'm about to check myself into a psychiatric facility so that Amanda will leave the house." And it allows both Jason and Daniela to head in and see the differences. And he starts pointing them out to Daniela. "Yeah, this photo here, well, it had you in it." He then heads up to the room that's supposed to be Charlie's, and he starts telling Daniela all about it, all about Charlie, who she doesn't know. And then the two discuss that fateful day when he came over and he picked work over Daniela, or in Jason's memory, Daniela over work. He takes some of the books from that office and he heads back to Daniela's apartment. He starts looking it over and he can't believe what he's seeing. Because whoever this world's Jason is, he did it. He completed his work. That Jason, Jason B, created a box that would allow a person to travel across multiple dimensions of reality. And Jason A realizes that Jason B used that box to travel to his world to basically pick up the life that he always wanted. Straight up Parent Trap situation. That's when he realized that the guy that abducted him was Jason, but from this reality, not the one that he left. It all sounds really crazy, but this is what Jason had been working on for most of his life, at least the theory of it, so Daniela just has to kind of buy it. But for that night, Jason's going to once again stay at Daniela's place. And Daniela goes up to him and says, "Can you tell us about our wedding?" And Jason starts retelling her about the wedding, and then they start kissing, but then they hear a knock at the door. And as there's a knock at the door that is pretty frantic, Daniela's phone rings. She has no idea who is on the other end. They don't identify themselves, and they hang up pretty quickly. And when Jason goes over the door gets shot open, and Jason's at gunpoint. Daniela starts to call for 911, but the woman ends up shooting Daniela in the head and then tasering Jason and taking him away. But Jason's theory about this alternative Jason, or Jason B as we're calling him, is absolutely factual. Jason B had been not only living in Jason A's reality for a while, he'd been monitoring Jason A. So that when the time came for him to steal his identity, he would know everything. He would know all about Charlie. He would know about birthdays. He would know enough so that it didn't seem suspicious. Although some things are suspicious. Like Jason B's philosophy on telling a girl that you like her is completely different from Jason A's. And Jason B doesn't know where the coffee is. But for the time being, Jason B is trying to acclimate himself to the life that he could have had in Jason A's world. In episode 3, Jason B continues to try to acclimate to his new life, but it's becoming more and more difficult because there are just things that he didn't plan on, people that he didn't know. An example of this pops up when he's at dinner and he's greeted by two people that he does not recognize, but his wife definitely knows. And his wife tells him that they're having a dinner party. And he plays it off like he forgot, but he just simply didn't know about it because there's only so much information he could garner from Jason A by surveilling him. And a dinner party was not one of those things. In order to kind of get some information on these people so that he doesn't seem like he doesn't know them, he starts asking Charlie. He plays it off like he's just forgotten some names and he needs to get a list together for this dinner party. But there's one guest in particular who he's curious about, and it's Daniela's best friend, Blair. And he pauses because he actually knows Blair from his other reality. But using all the information that Charlie's given him, he's got a note so he doesn't seem like he doesn't know these people. It does get interesting when Ryan shows up, because the last conversation that these two had was Jason B calling Ryan up and telling him to stop bothering he and Daniela about the job opportunity out in San Francisco. When he gets Jason B alone, not knowing, obviously, that this is another Jason, he does apologize for overstepping his bounds. The rest of the dinner party, though, goes off without a hitch. Jason B passes all tests, even though nobody actually knew they were testing him. And at the end of it, a very drunk Daniela is very into Jason B. She makes mention how the past few days have been different, but in a good way. He chalks up the change to a near-death experience that he had, almost getting hit by a car. In reality, it was a near-death experience that Jason A almost had, but he watched it go down. And at night, he heads up to Jason A's office and he watches home videos of Jason A interacting with his family, with Charlie, with Daniela, with all of it. Soaking it all in, he then moves on to a lockbox with a bunch of important details like birth certificates, and he just checks them out, kind of amazed. So things are going pretty great for Jason B. Jason A, though, not so much. He was dragged back to Velocity, and Layton is pissed. He's stressed out because they had to kill somebody, but he doesn't even blame Jason. He blames the facility for not being prepared for Jason's return, and that's because no one has ever returned from this. Layton vows to help Jason remember the brilliant man that he is. But at this point, Jason A, having just witnessed Daniela get shot in the head, tells him to go piss off. Layton gets even more stressed out, though, when later on he has to go and have a conversation with the police. Because Jason showing back up in society after being absent for so long did raise alarms. When Jason checked himself into that hospital, the police were notified. The police have come looking at Velocity to see if he's returned because they want to talk to him. They want to find out where he went. The detective, named Detective Mason, starts grilling Layton on the facility, what they do there at Velocity, and whether or not he's seen Jason. And Layton lies and says, no, I haven't. And then she starts questioning Layton on the other people that disappeared. And one of those people was Blair Kaplan. She actually went missing before Jason did. But just like with Jason, Layton's super vague on everything, acting like he has no idea what's going on. After Detective Mason talks to Layton, she goes and talks to Amanda, because Amanda and Jason were in a relationship, and it forces Amanda to lie. So when she links back up with Layton, she's pissed off. She doesn't like lying to the police. It's awkward for her. She's also pissed off about how everything went in regards to getting Jason back to the facility, and how Daniela ended up getting shot. She's not happy about that. She doesn't see a reason for it. Amanda throws all the blame on Layton because he put somebody who's clearly suffering from PTSD in charge of getting Jason and Daniela back to the facility. So she wasn't shocked at the outcome. But basically what you have here is two very, very stressed out individuals arguing amongst themselves. At one point, Jason yells at Amanda, look, Chicago PD is so close to connecting the dots on everything, with Jason, with Blair, and if they do, you know what happens. We end up losing everything. But as they're arguing, they hear amongst the surveillance video, Jason yell, okay, help me remember what happened. Because Jason A comes to the conclusion that he needs to figure out how Jason B got to his world so that he can get back to his world. Layton and Amanda walk back in the room, but before Layton just does a trip down memory lane, he needs to know what Jason told Daniela and if Jason talked to anybody else. Jason says, no, I didn't talk to anybody. I was just scared and I remembered her. When Layton gets the answers that he wants, he goes and escorts Jason A and shows him the box. It was always Jason A's theory that it could be done, but Jason B took it to another level. With Jason A marveling at this big, giant box, Layton asks him, okay, so do you remember your breakthrough? Like when you started scaling up in size? And Jason A says, no, I don't. Layton starts going through what the box is made of, how Jason came up with the entire premise, really. They then decide to open it up so Jason can see the inside, and that's when they tell him that he's the only one to return. There were others, and they have no idea what happened to him because recording devices don't work inside the box. They inform him that there were 3 people before he entered the box. They then give Jason A all of Jason B's files in the hopes that if he reviews them, he can remember. But all Jason A is doing is just reading it in amazement at the breakthroughs that Jason B made. hours later, when Amanda comes to check on him, he mentions how it's weird. It's like reading your own biography after you died. It's becoming clear to Amanda that he really doesn't remember. So she says, okay, well, I'm Amanda Lucas. I'm a psychiatrist. I train the box pilots, but I oversaw the trials for Lavender Fairy. That's the drug that Ryan created. We lived together and we were together off and on for over a year. Sometimes extreme stress situations can trigger psychogenetic amnesia. And that's when Jason A says, what if I'm not the person that I think I am? That all these thoughts are, like you said, just a byproduct of trauma. Sort of brain damage from working here and being inside the box. I mean, those files, that's me, but even these clothes, they're not mine, but they might as well be. So what if I'm not me? I'm the person that everyone else thinks that I am. And Amanda's pretty amazed at that. She doesn't really know what to say. She just walks out. A little while later, though, Jason A gets into some trouble. He gets brought into the same room where he was brought back when he returned. And Layton's in there interrogating him. A bunch of people are outside watching this go down, although Jason A doesn't know it. And Layton tells him, I think the reason why you don't remember anything about you is because you're not you. So why don't you tell us the truth? Because you told Ryan Holder the truth. And they bring in Ryan. And the first thing Ryan does is apologize. He didn't know he was going to get this Jason into trouble. Velocity called, wondering if he knew where Jason was. He said, yeah, he's at Daniela's. And he didn't know what he was sending to Daniela's apartment that night. Layton's pissed. He looks at this Jason as an imposter. He starts asking Jason A where he's from, and he wants to know where Jason B is. But as Layton is giving Jason more and more questions, Jason snaps, diving across the table and attacking him. Although that doesn't really go too well. He's outnumbered and he's getting his ass beat pretty good. They tie Jason A up and Layton continues on with this interrogation. Because he's got this box and he doesn't know how to use it. And the only hope of figuring out how to use it is this imposter Jason. He continues to ask Jason how it works. Jason continues to say he doesn't know. And finally, they just throw Jason in another room. And this time, he's got a roommate. It's Ryan. Jason starts asking Ryan, what were you working on? Because you're the missing piece. And Ryan says, well, you asked me to create a drug that altered the brain chemistry of the prefrontal cortex. It would put certain areas of the prefrontal cortex to sleep for an hour. Jason asks him, why would I do that? But Ryan flips out on him and says, you wouldn't tell me. Jason explains to Ryan that they were trying to put a human in superposition. Now, theoretically, that is impossible. The consciousness wouldn't allow it. And that's when Ryan realizes that that's it. My drug allows you to actually do that. Jason starts telling Ryan all about the box because Ryan truly was in the dark about everything. But that's when Layton walks back in and interrupts the conversation. He takes Ryan away, leaving Jason all alone in the room. But a little while later, Amanda comes. She frantically tells him that he needs to come with her right that second she's getting him out of there. When Jason asks what about Ryan, she just shakes her head and says, I'm sorry. As they make their way down the hallway, Jason asks her, why are you helping me? And she says, I don't know if I can come back from what I've done, but I'm going to try. As they're trying to escape through the front door, just like Jason did the first time he showed up, they get caught by Layton and they have to flee back downstairs. They don't really know where to go, and there's only one exit out of there. Theoretically, it's the box. They get there just in the nick of time, and they lock themselves in before they're caught. Jason really doesn't want Amanda to come with him, but she's not giving him a choice. She knows that her other option is stay there and die. She then pulls out Ryan's drug and injects both of them with it. They knock out, and when they wake up, they're in the box, but the box is turned into a long, long, long hallway. In episode 3, Jason A and Amanda continue to walk down this corridor of nothing but doors, and finally they decide to just open one, and they go through it. It's Chicago, but it is like a post-apocalyptic Chicago. There is no one around, and as they get outside, some of the buildings start crumbling, and it forces them to run back to where they came from and get into this hallway. Jason realizes that what they're currently in is a multiverse. Every single doorway unlocks another possibility that could have happened. When they get back in the box, they once again have to put themselves under. They only have 46 more chances to do this, so they're either going to have to figure out how to get back to Jason A's world or figure out how to get more of Ryan's drug. They continue to go down the corridor, opening up doors to see if they recognize anything that looks like Velocity. Because every time you open up one of those doors, you're supposed to be back at Velocity's headquarters. Although sometimes it looks way different. And other times it doesn't look like a headquarters at all because it's in the middle of the woods. In one instance, they open up the door, but the world is basically gone. And the world isn't even inhabitable anymore. They can't even breathe. It freaks out Amanda so much, she runs down the corridor, and Jason has to chase after her and say, Amanda, relax. I told you, there's no end to this. You got to get your head wrapped around this. This is a multiverse. I mean, somewhere in one of these doors, there's the reality that we didn't get into the box back at Velocity, and that me and you were stuck out of it. There's endless possibilities down here. And in fact, the next time they open up a door, they are back at Velocity, and they are in that very scenario. They're looking at themselves, trapped out of the box, getting caught by Layton, where Amanda ends up getting shot in the head. And they have to rush back in the box, retake the drug, and get knocked out. Unfortunately, Jason A just can't figure out how to control this thing. Every time he opens up a door, it seems like the scenario is just cataclysmic. To make things worse, they have no food and they have no water. And a very stressed out Amanda grabs the lantern and says, screw this, opens up a door, and walks right out into a snowstorm. Jason is forced to go after her and try to get her back in the box, but Amanda starts to collapse because of the conditions. And Jason can't find his way back to the box. Luckily, though, Jason does notice a house in the distance, and he has to go get Amanda there and make camp for the night. He's able to start a fire, and the next morning, he's able to wake up Amanda, even though she's in a little bit of a rough condition. Amanda is so mad at herself because she trains people on how to act in these conditions, and she failed that test. But these conditions do remind her of her childhood. She tells Jason that every winter her and her dad would go skiing, and you would get these whiteouts that looked a lot like the one they just lived through. And something clicks with Jason, and he asks her, is there any chance that you had that thought yesterday? And she admits, yeah, I did. And then he remembers that yesterday they watched themselves stuck out of a box right after he had mentioned that very scenario. It's at that moment that Jason is able to put together how Jason B was able to get to his world. You literally just have to think of this thing, and then your mind puts you in those scenarios. Jason says these worlds are a reflection of our emotional state the moment we open that door. This revelation that they can go home is really exciting to them. Now it's just a matter of finding their way back to the box, which is really tough to do, but they are able to do it thanks to a GPS system and a little ingenuity. Before they decide to inject themselves with Ryan's serum, they decide to warm up a little bit because they are freezing cold. And Jason makes mention that that day is his son's birthday, and he starts going into a little bit of a backstory with Amanda on his kid and the relationship between the mom and him and his son being born and tragedy that struck. Being away from them on this particular day is just really, really difficult for Jason once he remembers that it is Charlie's birthday. They then get into a conversation about what Jason B is like. And Amanda says that he wasn't really happy because all he did was work, but he had such a determination. And that's when Jason A reveals to her that it was Jason B who put him in this situation. It was Jason B who kidnapped him, who put him in the box, and who sent him to this world. She can't quite figure out why Jason B would do that, and of course Jason A can't either. He can't figure out if Jason B wanted his life so badly, why didn't he just kill him? Why did he go through all the trouble to send him back to his world? And Amanda tells him, look, Jason B's no monster. If he did this to you, he would have rationalized it. In your world, you're a teacher, right? You're probably not wealthy. So my Jason probably told himself that he was giving you a chance of a lifetime. A shot at the path not taken. And this was the path not taken for both of you. Because the one thing that you had that he didn't was Daniela and Charlie. And that's something Jason A hadn't even considered, and it floors him. Now, it is worth mentioning, as these two sit in the box and they chat, waiting for the next opportunity to take the serum, Layton did go after them. He went back in the box, he took the serum, and he is just going corridor to corridor trying to open doors and find them. And it is not going well. After going into one particular corridor, he comes back and he is banged up, bleeding, and in rough shape. As for Jason B, he's making some waves. He goes to teach his class and he decides, yeah, I'm not really built for this. And he quits, literally walking out. He then decides to track down that world's Layton. And that world's Layton is living a life a lot different than his world's Layton. You see, his world's Layton is the head of Velocity. Jason A's Layton is living a penthouse lifestyle thanks to a very nice trust fund provided by his father. His father is running Velocity, and he doesn't see eye to eye with his father at all. Velocity was a company that his grandfather started, handed it down to his father, and now Jason is just sitting there living the life, spending money he didn't really earn. That's when he decides to take Layton on a little road trip to the box that he built. Layton remembers this box theory from college. But now you've got Jason standing in front of him saying, yeah, well, I built it. Here it is. Let me show you how it works. The two of them take Ryan's serum and head inside. Layton's a little worried, and Jason explains that if you think the wrong thing in the corridor, it could affect the door that they open. You have some control over it, but it could ruin it for everybody. So in order to show Layton the good side of the box and what it's capable of, he tells Layton to take a long, deep breath, focus on that, and then he'll take care of the rest. When they get out of the box, Layton says, that is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. But you could have shown this to anyone. Why me? And Jason tells him, you're the only one I trust. Back in my world, where I came from, I partnered with you. We built this thing. I trusted that Layton. I knew what he was capable of, so I'm trusting you. Layton asks Jason, why are you here then? And Jason tells him, I'm here to fix something that I messed up. At the end of their chat, Layton is fully on board and he's willing to invest a lot of money into whatever Jason wants to do after seeing the results. The problem is Jason B didn't know about what he was missing at home. Yes, he knew about Charlie's birthday, but he didn't know about Max. Max was Charlie's twin brother. Max passed away. And every single birthday, they had a ceremony out in their backyard where they planted a tree for Max in his memory. And he missed it. And the way that Jason B has been acting, well, it's nice in certain instances, but then it's off-putting and weird. Charlie even brings it up to Daniela. But this, missing the ceremony, that's something that they never could have imagined. And when he gets home that day, he has to play it off like, oh yeah, that's right, I forgot, but how could you forget? And that's when he surprises Charlie with a big birthday present. It's a car. And Daniela is pissed. They don't really have the money for that. And then he pisses her off even more by saying, yeah, I quit my job. She can't believe he quit his job without talking to her first. And that's when he explains that idea he had back in college for the box, well, he got some funding and he's going to do it. And he thinks that she should go back to doing her art. Jason B is trying to create his life that he had in his world, but he's trying to recreate it in Jason A's world. In episode 5, the next day, Jason B brings Layton to the box so they can continue his training. Layton's really excited about this multiverse, but he does ask Jason, why do you need my money? You could just go from world to world and pull off bank robberies. And Jason says, no, that's not the way it really works. Serial numbers vary from world to world, so if I bring in money from another world, it could be looked at as counterfeiting and I could get caught. Look, Layton, you need to be super careful about every decision you make. That box could be a one-way door for you. Right before they actually go in the box, Jason reminds Layton that it is the utmost importance you're always honest, especially with yourself. What you're feeling in that moment is going to dictate what you're opening that door to. Layton says he understands. They go in the box, they take the serum, and next thing you know, they're in the corridor, opening up doors, and Layton is giddy. As they open up doors and doors, Layton's getting more and more excited until he turns to Jason B and says, hey, I got an idea for another world I want to visit. But they're running out of time. And Jason reminds him, I got to get us back to our world. I've got 12 more vials of the serum, and I still have to take us on one more training session. After that, I'm going to leave you with 10 vials of the serum. Layton asks him if he can get more, but Jason says, in theory, but I'm not a chemist. The whole process is really costly. It takes a little bit of time. And Layton cuts him off and says, when our training is done, I'll pay you $1 million for every single vial that you send me off with. That is one hell of an offer. When Jason B gets home that night, Daniela, though, is pissed. She's still upset about the car, quitting the job thing, missing the time with Max's birthday. She's frustrated, and Jason B apologizes for everything and is agreeing to open up to her regarding any questions she has. He tells her all about this investment. He tells her that it's with Layton, who she knows, and he tells her that it could be worth millions of dollars. After answering all of Daniella's questions, Jason knows he needs to get more of those vials, and he knows a place he can get it. He goes back to his world. He used the box, but it sets off alarms in Velocity. The one doctor that's on duty that day is shocked because here comes Dr. Desser, and she didn't expect to see him maybe ever again. And he literally is stopping by to grab more vials and then head back to where he was. While grabbing it, though, he does notice there's blood on the ground, and when the one doctor makes her way downstairs to ask Dr. Desser if he's going to stay or not, he asks her what happened here. And she says that another guy that looked just like him showed up. He and Amanda went in the box. Layton followed. With the information, he just heads back in the box and heads back to Jason A's world. And when he gets there, Layton's waiting for him. He tells Layton that he got 50 vials for him. Layton is ecstatic. He asks Jason B, after you train me up, then what? And Jason B says, you're on your own after that. As for me, I'm going to seal up this box, but don't worry. I'm just sealing up this box. The other boxes will be completely open to you. So that's what Jason B is planning on. And that means Jason A doesn't have a ton of time to make this thing right. And Jason A and Amanda are just trying to still figure out how to correctly use the box. They think they've got it down, but when they open it, the box is in the middle of the ocean. So they get completely soaked. They're lucky to even be alive. It forces them to have to dry their clothes and make small talk just to kill time as they wait for their clothes to not be sopping wet. Jason A tells a story about his mom dying in the hospital, but the candy bars that he really liked in the machine. And when that conversation dies out, he asks Amanda, who was the first person to go missing from the box? And Amanda says her name was Blair. She was our lead engineer for the box. When that serum wears off, they're back inside the box and they open it up to see what world they're in. And it looks like Velocity, but nobody's there. And the more they dig around, it looks like something happened there. Not only is the power shut off, but you've got a dead body in one of the beds. And as Amanda is discussing what would have had to happen to put protocols in place like shutting the elevators down, the power, they get stopped by someone with a shotgun. But Amanda recognizes her voice, and that's because it's Blair. Blair, the one that went missing from Amanda's world, the first one in the box, has ended up at this particular Velocity. And she's been there for a couple months. They fill Blair in on exactly who Jason A is, what Jason B did to him, all of it. And then she takes them up to the control room to show them what happened at this Velocity facility for it to look like it's deserted. She plays a surveillance tape of herself, but it's another version of herself coming through the box and bringing with her these giant hornet-like animals that basically consume the planet. They multiplied at a rapid rate, and when you look at the live feed of outside the facility, these things are everywhere. She has no idea what they are. She just knows they're very dangerous, and the people that did survive, they're not really seen anymore. They're probably staying inside, like she is. What Amanda can't figure out is what Blair is currently doing in this world, because she's got to have extra vials. I mean, they're at Velocity. The extra vials have got to be laying around somewhere. And a frustrated Blair says, well, whoever survived probably took most of them with them. Look, I have my own vials. But the more that Amanda pushes, the more frustrated Blair gets until finally she snaps and says, look, I'm not getting in that box until I'm ready to get back in that box. Do you understand? Amanda recognizes she's probably got to give Blair a little bit of time to calm down. And once she does, they sort of pick back up the conversation. Blair tells Amanda she doesn't understand why she went in that box. She asks her, what exactly are you going to do if you do find Jason A's world? I mean, there might already be a you there. He has a family at least there. And Amanda, quite frankly, hasn't even thought about that. She's just been trying to survive. Blair gets super deep with Amanda and says, you're not just homeless, you're worldless. And the longer you stay in that box, drifting from one place to the next, the more you're going to crack. I know it just feels like this started, but time isn't on your side. You have to start figuring out what kind of world you want to end up in. And the most important thing is you do what's best for you and not Jason A. Amanda changed the topic because she does feel guilty. Her whole job at Velocity was to train people like Blair for situations, and seeing Blair and seeing the conditions she's in, she feels like she's failed. But Blair says, no, I went in there on my choice. Stop with this self-blaming crap that you're doing. I'm fine. Right before Jason A. and Amanda head back in the box, Blair gives them her journal that she's made for all the worlds she's traveled to. She feels like it might be able to help. The last bit of advice she gives them is the fact that it seems like it's just so easy. You focus on a world that you want to go to and you connect to it. But no, it takes so much more than that. Everything intrudes. Fear, stray thoughts, subconscious desire. She admits that with all her training, she could never control the box. Jason A. and Amanda then get in the box. They close the door, and Amanda once again starts beating herself up over the state of Blair. She feels like she's ruined her life. And what she really can't figure out is Jason B., because Jason B. was able to control everything, and he could have stopped all this. Jason A., though, tries to make her feel better by just telling her a different story about his decision with Daniela, about having a family with her, and then eventually the two take the serum. He's going to try a new theory after what Blair said, and that's just writing down what he wants. Feels like that could possibly help, because it's hard to write something down and think something else. And initially, it seems to have worked. When they open the box back up, it looks like Jason is back in the warehouse where he was taken, and he's really excited. But the more they get into the heart of Chicago, the more they realize that this isn't quite the Chicago that Jason left. Jason doesn't seem to notice it at first, but Amanda definitely does. And that's because Chicago, and probably the world, has been struck by a pandemic. The streets are completely deserted, and when Jason gets to his house, he knocks on the door, and Daniela answers, but she is very sick and shocked to see him. Because as she tells him, they took you away. You were dead. A couple of military figures show up. They test Jason A. and Amanda, make sure that they're not positive with whatever this sickness is. And then they go in the house to test Daniela, and they come back out and tell Jason she's got maybe a day to live. And they give him a morphine pack to end it quietly. It's really tough for Jason. He doesn't want to end Daniela's life, but he knows that in order to have a chance with his own Daniela, he has to do this. Seeing his wife like that was just not very easy, and when he leaves that world, he's a little shook. Amanda feels like this is a good example of the subconscious, because just a couple hours ago, they were talking about Jason and his mom passing away, and clearly this was his big fear, was that his family would die of some disease just like his mom did. She feels like this could end up being a good thing because that world taught them a lot about how the box works. So they try again, and when they open the box back up, it once again is in the facility where Jason was kidnapped. But when they go out Chicago this time, it looks like the Chicago that Jason left. People are in the streets, cars are whizzing by. Unfortunately, though, it's not quite the Chicago that Jason left. When he gets to his house, he's able to get inside and he grabs a knife, assuming that Jason B will be there and he's going to have to fight him off. But Jason B isn't there. Daniela is, and she's terrified. She yells for Charlie to go to the neighbors, and then she grabs the phone and starts calling for 911. The whole time, Jason A is trying to explain, Daniela, it's me. I'm your husband. But when she gets the 911 dispatcher on the phone, she says, my ex-husband is here. He's holding a knife. He's supposed to be in jail. And that's when reality hits Jason A that he clearly is not in the world that he actually left. He apologizes to both Charlie and Daniela for whatever that world's Jason did, and he knows he has to leave. The cops, though, they're on their way. So in order to get back to the box, they're going to have to find safe passage. They can't just walk the streets. And Amanda figures, well, I know where to go. We'll go to my mom's place. And that's when it goes from bad to worse. Because when they get to Amanda's mom's place, well, it turns out in that world, Amanda had passed away. So Amanda showing up at her mom's place, her mom is basically seeing a ghost. Amanda recognizes this pretty quickly. She gives her mom some really nice words, says she's doing better, she's in a better place, and then she steals her car, and then they get back to the box. They then get back in the box and get ready to try it all over again. In episode 6, Jason A and Amanda continue to go through worlds, and they're getting better at it. The worlds are less toxic, they're happier. Every world they go to, Jason A writes down a little bit more about what he's looking for. trying to write down exactly the Daniela and Charlie that he's trying to get to. The big issue, though, is they're running out of vials. And unfortunately, while they're getting closer and closer, they're just not having any luck finding the exact Chicago that Jason A. came from. After one such trip, they decide, you know what, we need a break. I don't feel like going back to the box. Let's just get a place to lay low tonight in this world, Chicago. They get a hotel room. They go out for dinner. Basically, they have a date. I mean, it even ends with dancing, and the two are a little bit drunk as they head back to the hotel. And for whatever reason, even though they got two beds, they decide to go to sleep in the same bed with clothes on. But late in the night, Jason A starts playing Big Spoon. They have a little bit of a conversation, and he decides, you know what? I don't really want you to go to that other bed, but Amanda, I think I need you to go to that other bed because I've still got a Daniela that I'm trying to get back to. The next day they wake up, they go to another Chicago, another world, and Amanda says, I'm going to need a day to myself. Let's just meet back here tonight. We'll figure some things out. If it's your world, great. You can stay, obviously, but I just need to be alone. Unfortunately for Jason, it's not his world. He goes to the art gallery that Daniela works at, but she doesn't work at the art gallery in this world. She owns it, and she's got blonde hair. Looking superb, by the way. And he tries to ask her out for coffee, but she turns him down because it's a little weird. Random guy coming off the street asking you if you want to go get coffee. Bizarre. When he reconvenes with Amanda later that night at the box, it turns out she kind of did the same thing. She spent the day looking at herself in this world from afar. Because this was a pretty emotional day, they once again decide to get a hotel room, but it's just becoming a lot for Jason A. He tells Amanda, I gotta go get some food. Problem is, he doesn't go get food. He doesn't come back for a long time. And Amanda gets super worried. She starts calling hospitals, and that's when Jason A. reappears. And he didn't go get food. He went to go look at himself in that world. And it turns out that in that world, Jason and Daniela are together. Yeah, blonde-haired Daniela, Jason, they're loving their life. And he admits to Amanda that suddenly he understands how Jason B. could have done to him what he did. He figures that Jason B. must have been stalking him for 3 weeks from afar, just watching, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Amanda, upon hearing all this, just says, this isn't working. And the world that you're looking for is a grain of sand on a beach. They get in a little bit of an argument about this because Amanda wants him to try something different. She reminds him, we've only got 10 vials left, and what we've been doing is not working. Now, while things aren't going great for Jason A at the moment, they're actually going a lot better for him than Jason B. It doesn't start out that way, though. Jason B gets the deal with Layton done. They are millionaires. Upon completion of the deal, he tells Daniela, you need to go do your art full time, which, ironically, she's actually in the process of doing. She's painting a picture when he tells her about the deal. All that's left for Jason is to go drop the serum off with Layton, put him in the box, and send him on his way, and then get rid of the box. Before he does that, though, he drops Charlie off at a date at the skate park, and then he heads to meet Layton. Layton is pumped. He shakes his hand. He wishes him well, and then Layton gets in the box and disappears for good. He then has to go pick Charlie back up from the date. He picked him up some ice cream, which is cool. The problem is, as they're making conversation, Charlie starts choking because Jason B was completely oblivious to the fact that Charlie has a nut allergy, and the ice cream that he gave him has nuts in it. So he suddenly has to rush Charlie to the hospital where when Daniela shows up, she is pissed off. She can't understand how Jason B could be so oblivious to the fact that their son has a nut allergy. I mean, who forgets that? But it's just a little more information that Jason B was unaware of that he couldn't pick up in the 3 to 4 weeks he was watching Jason A from afar. And this gets Daniela's antenna up because this is yet another thing, a big thing that he's forgotten. And this Jason seems to have changed in minor ways, like he flosses now. Her old Jason never did. It's weird. She tells Blair all of this, but the big revelation is the fact that she's noticed he's got track marks on his arm. So Blair says follow him. Find out what he's doing. And while they were having this conversation, Jason B was busy in a therapy session. But the therapist, it turns out, is that world's Amanda. Jason B, not wanting to lose track of his old girlfriend, decided, kill two birds with one stone, try to make sense of everything I'm doing, and be able to see Amanda. In this therapy session, they talk about the fact that Daniela is really, really pissed at him for what happened with Charlie, and he needs to make it up to her. He likes a big romantic gesture, so he does one, or at least he thinks he does. Later that night, he brings her to the art gallery that she works at to show her that he had them put in her painting, thinking this would be a good thing, but it's not. She's mortified. They get into a big argument on the drive home because, one, the painting wasn't finished, and two, she feels like they put it up there because they pity her. And she wasn't happy with the artwork to begin with. She hasn't painted in years. And Jason B can't figure out why she's not happy about this. This fight is nasty, it's contentious, and it ends with Daniela getting out of the car and Jason B driving away. So Daniela decides to follow Blair's advice and follow Jason B. She follows him all the way to the storage unit where he was keeping all of his things, the vials, guns, phones, you name it. And while she can't get into the storage unit fully, she is able to open it up a crack and find one of the vials. And the only person she knows who might be able to figure out what was in the vial is Ryan. So she goes and asks him, hey, can you reverse engineer this thing and find out what he's taking because he's different? Ryan decides to work on it the next day as Jason B once again goes to a therapy session with That World's Amanda. But when he gets home from it, Ryan's waiting for him. And he asks him, did you think that I wouldn't find out? You didn't want to work with me because you were too busy stealing my shit? Yeah, Jason A's Ryan reverse engineered it all right. And he discovered that what Jason B was taking was basically what he was working on, what he got funded for. They decide to go to the corner bar, have a drink, talk about it. Jason B swears that he didn't steal it. He just discovered it on his own. They talk a little bit of shop. They discuss the differences between Ryan's and Jason's. And then Jason decides to go show him the box. Jason B shows him exactly how his serum works. He injects both of them. They go in the box. They open up a door. And Ryan is floored at what he's seeing. But as Ryan is marveling at the view of Chicago, Jason B is slowly backing up. He's got Ryan's phone in his hand because he told Ryan he would take a picture for him, but he never did. And when Ryan turns around and sees just how far Jason B is from him, he says, "You're not this world's Jason, are you?" And Jason admits, "No, I'm not." But it's too late because Jason B shuts the door on Ryan and Ryan is locked in whatever Chicago Jason B put him in. When Jason B steps out of the box, he realizes that he might have a bigger problem, though. As he's holding Ryan's phone starts buzzing, and he sees it's Daniela calling. He's going to have to figure out what to do about that situation, but before that happens, he needs to unassemble the box, and he does that, destroying any chance that Jason A has of coming back and breaking up what Jason B worked so hard for. In episode 7, it's a few days after the events that took place with Jason B kidnapping Ryan and leaving him in that world. Daniela's starting to get concerned because she hasn't heard from Ryan. He was supposed to get back to her, he didn't, and she's wondering what's up, having no idea what actually happened to him. Meanwhile, Jason B is just trying to act like every day it's business as usual. Although that day gets interrupted by Detective Mason. Because when Ryan went missing, red flags went up. I mean, he was a pretty prominent guy in the community. People are going to notice when somebody like that goes missing. And according to surveillance footage, the last person he was seen with was Jason in the village tap. Detective Mason asked some routine questions like, what was his mood that day? Did he seem off? And Jason B, just looking to cover his tracks, says, yeah, he was very off. He seemed weird. I don't know what happened. It's crazy. She thanks both Jason and Daniela for their time, and then she heads out. And with Daniela finding out what actually happened to Ryan, she decides to confront Jason B with the vial. She says, this is why I went to Ryan. I followed you to that storage unit, and I found it there. He was supposed to look into it and find out exactly what it was that you were taking. Jason B, just thinking quickly on his feet, says, yeah, Ryan made this for me. He didn't tell you because he was under a strict NDA. He tells her that the serum that was in there allows him to study microscopic objects while he's in superposition. That's not really a good enough answer for Daniela. She asks him if he's using it. He says yes. She makes him stop. He says okay. All of this really is to just put Daniela's mind at ease. She does ask him what's in the storage unit, and he just says, yeah, it's a lot of stuff for the project. He doesn't get into details. Later that day, Jason B decides to go to his therapy session with Amanda, but it doesn't go well. He completely insults her. He decides to flip the script, and instead of Amanda asking him questions, he decides to start asking her questions, which she doesn't really like because she's not the one that needs the therapy session. But Jason B doesn't stop. He continues on with why Amanda got into the field of therapy. And you can tell from her face that he nailed it. It was never her first love. She had to take care of somebody, and now she feels like she has to take care of everybody, so this line of work just suited her. But it bothers her so much that she kicks Jason B out of the therapy session. And it goes from bad to worse because when Jason B gets home that day, Detective Mason is waiting for him again. They decide to look up Ryan Holder's cell phone records, and they found that the last known location of a ping was in an industrial park with not a lot of surveillance footage. It's pretty clear that Detective Mason thinks that Jason had something to do with the disappearance of Ryan, but she has to kind of curtail the questioning a bit. So she just asks him if he has any idea why Ryan would have went to that location in the middle of the night, if he went with him, and of course Jason B denies knowing anything. She has to accept his answers, but as she leaves, she lets him know that there aren't many surveillance cameras there, but if they do end up picking up some interesting footage, she'll be sure to stop by. With now having 2 visits from a detective about Ryan's disappearance, Jason knows he needs to do something about it. Now, he did shut down the box. He didn't completely dismantle it, though. So he heads to the industrial park. He busts a hole through the wall of it so he has a way to get in and out, and he goes to another world. He finds some Ryan that is simply a car mechanic. Doesn't really have a lot going for him. No one's really going to miss him, and he gets this Ryan completely trashed. I mean, so drunk that he has no idea where he is. And that's when Jason B drags him into the box and back to that world, taking him back to Ryan's apartment, cleaning him up and putting him to bed, and hoping that he can play this off like Ryan just went on a bender, even though this particular Ryan that he brought back is terrified. Now, as for Jason A, he and Amanda are continuing to pop through worlds, but they're running out of vials quickly. They don't have many left, and that's when Amanda takes charge and decides to take him to a Chicago that is pretty close to a utopian society. There aren't many complaints. It's beautiful. Everyone's embracing technology and education and all that. And yes, it is far from the world that Jason left, but it's pretty nice and it's a good distraction from reality. They head to a bar later that day. They have a really good time, and they decide to grab dinner that night. And it's at dinner where Amanda tells Jason that she's not getting back in the box. She looked up what happened to herself in that world, and herself went missing. And the similarities between that world's Amanda and herself are, well, there are a lot of them. Since that world's Amanda was never pronounced dead, Amanda, thanks to an app, is able to quickly get a passport and live out her days in this world. She's just going to assume this Amanda's identity, completely content. At first, Jason A is a little pissed off. He's like, "You're abandoning me?" She says, "No, Jason, I want you to stay with me." Because whether he likes it or not, Jason A has developed feelings for Amanda. And the feeling obviously is mutual because Amanda already fell in love with one Jason, and this Jason's just kind of better. And while Jason A does consider staying in this world, ultimately he decides, I can't. I got to go find my Daniela, even though that's going to be very, very difficult. He actually wants to give her some of the vials just in case she decides this world isn't for her, but she says, "Jason, no world is perfect. I'm going to make a home in Seattle where everybody's forgotten about me, and I'm going to live out my days." He then stands up, they share a hug, then they share a kiss, and Jason A leaves. Amanda is seemingly right behind him, and it seems like on the elevator ride down, she does have some regrets because it looks like she kind of chases after him a bit, but it's too late. Jason A has gotten in the box, and he's headed to his new worlds. He's only got 3 vials left, and after 2 trips, it's looking real bleak. The second to last vial, he actually makes to a world that's pretty similar to his, and he goes so far as to sneak into his house. He's slowly starting to understand even more how Jason B did to him what Jason A did. He even considers it. But as he's trying to leave that house, because he realizes that's crazy, Charlie comes down, or at least he thinks. It turns out, actually, it's Max. Because in that world, Max survived. And Jason is able to say goodbye to his son one last time, although the conversation is pretty contentious. It doesn't go real well. but at least it gives Jason A some closure. Jason gets back into the box and he has one vial left. He has to make it count. So he decides to write the most descriptive detail about his Daniela, how they met, and it works. The last vial has led him to his world. Jason A runs home. Running past the theater, by the way, that's very interesting because the movies that are playing at this theater, I just want to point out, are It's a Wonderful Life, Summer Frost, which is a movie about a last chance at hope, and the movie Upgrade. So, solid job by the creators. But anyway, back to the storyline. Jason A gets back to his house, but he's very, very careful on whether or not to go in. He's standing on the porch. He's just watching his Daniela, his Charlie, and then he watches Jason B come inside, and he decides, I probably should arm myself. So he heads to a gun shop, but after getting shut down, he buys mace, he buys a knife, and then he leaves. But the weirdest thing happens, because 10 seconds later, another Jason shows up looking to buy a gun. He has the same lines as the previous one. And this isn't Jason B. No, this is Jason C. Now, we're just adding Jasons here, folks. There's another Jason running around. In episode 8, Jason B is unaware that there are now 2 Jasons running around that Chicago, but he finds out real quick. As he's going to take the trash out, he is attacked by a Jason. This one holding a knife, but this one doesn't survive. Jason B is able to fight him off and kill him. And now he's got to put the body somewhere, so he decides his garage would be the best place. And as he's wrapping up the body, he's almost caught by Charlie. Things are starting to unravel for Jason B. And another example of this is while he was trying to dispose of a body, Daniela was at Ryan's apartment. She got a call from Ryan's girlfriend that he wasn't doing well. She headed over there, and Ryan just started talking about how he doesn't know her. He's a mechanic. Daniela, thinking that something's wrong with him, sits him down and says, okay, what's the last thing you remember? And he says that he was in a bar and some guy just kept buying him shots. He'd never seen him before. And when Daniela shows Ryan a picture of Jason, immediately Ryan goes, yeah, no, that's him. Because in Mechanic Ryan's world, he never met Jason. Now, Daniela has no idea what's going on, but she knows something's up. She gives Ryan's girlfriend a location of a mental hospital that she can check him into because he does sound a bit nuts, and then she heads home. As for her actual husband, well, Jason A got his weapons. He headed to a hotel, but as he was leaving and trying to formulate a plan, he was met in the hallway by himself. He knew it wasn't Jason B because the guy ran off, but Jason A was a little surprised, and when he went to go chase after the guy, he couldn't initially find him. He did, however, notice shortly after leaving the hotel that he was being tailed by this Jason. We'll just call him Jason C, F. I don't know. Pick a letter in the alphabet, folks. I'm not doing everything for you. It's another Jason. He's following him. Jason A is able to dip into the bar that he always goes to and lose him. But as he's buying a drink from the bartender that he knows really well, he looks over in the corner, and there's another Jason. This one seems important, so I'll just actually give him a name. He'll be Jason C. And Jason A and Jason C sit down, and they have a chat over a beer. They are the same person. They were both kidnapped. The Daniela and Charlie in that world are their Daniela and Charlie. Jason C made it back a day ago. Jason A made it back a few hours ago. They both watched Daniela die right in front of them. They both were taken back to Velocity and beaten up. The big difference is that Jason C's Amanda got lost in a really bad world, dangerous world. And obviously we know what happened with Jason A's Amanda. What they figure out together is that different versions of themselves must have spawned off in the box. Now, some of them ran out of the serum, they died, they got lost in worlds, but others actually made it back just like they did. So they have no idea how many Jasons are running around that Chicago, but, well, they know it's at least 4. Jason C brings up his plan on what he's going to do with Jason B. He's planning on dumping him in a grave that he dug that day near the river. Jason A points out how he tried to buy a gun, but he was unsuccessful. And that's when Jason C says, yeah, well, you don't have a gun. I do. Jason C, though, gets deep. He tells Jason A, the big issue is we all think we're the original guy. And that means we all think that Daniela and Charlie are ours. So I'm telling you now, if I see Jason B, I'm taking him down, but I'm taking down anybody that gets in my way of being with Daniela and Charlie. He then buys Jason A the drink and he heads off. That means that Jason A is going to have to formulate some kind of plan. The next morning when Daniela gets up, she asks Jason B if he can take Charlie to school, and she's got some things to move for the art gallery. In reality, she just wants to go to the storage unit and see what's in it. They get into a little bit of an argument because Jason B is adamant that she don't take the car that he dumped the body in. Obviously, he didn't reveal that there's a body in it. That's why he doesn't want her to take it. But it's just another red flag to Daniela that something is off. As Jason B drives Charlie to school later that day, Charlie says, "Wait, where are you going? You were supposed to show me the University of Chicago," which is Jason B's alma mater. And Jason B, having no idea about this, just decides to pivot and say, "Okay, yeah, no, we'll take a tour." As they're taking the tour, though, and Jason B is doing a trip down memory lane of how he met Daniela, he sees in the distance that another Jason is following him. So he decides to speed this tour up a bit. As he and Charlie are weaving in and out of buildings, trying to lose this other Jason, Charlie very confused on what's going on, Daniela has made it to the storage unit, and she finds all the cell phones. She also finds a bunch of U.S. currency that doesn't look like any currency she's ever seen before. I mean, hell, one has JFK on the $20 bill. But the most interesting thing she finds is a mechanic's jacket with Ryan's name on it. As she's looking at all of this, she gets a phone call from the police. They tell her that Jason's been arrested for smoking in a restaurant. That was Jason A's master plan. That's how he decided he was going to get Daniela one-on-one. And initially when she bails him out, she is pissed off. But he explains, look, anything that's happened in the last couple of weeks, that is not me. That is somebody else. And I know this sounds crazy. The last time I saw you is when I went to go talk to Ryan about his award. That guy is using my box that I developed. He's traveling through different worlds. He kidnapped me. And just like any sane person, Daniela does not believe it, but he says, "I'll prove it to you. Just do me one favor. Call me right now." When Daniela does that, she is shocked because even though her husband is standing in front of her, somebody answers her husband's cell phone, and it's not the guy in front of her. She's so freaked out, she immediately hangs up, and Jason A says, "Now call him back and tell him that you want to go back to that place in the Florida Keys that we vacationed at last Christmas. Me and you know that we didn't actually do that, but he doesn't. Just see what he says." So Daniela does that, and Jason B, answering the phone, says, "Oh, yeah, no, I remember that trip. No, that sounds great." And that's when Daniela finally believes that Jason A is telling the truth. Jason A tells her to grab Charlie and meet him at Millennium Park next to that huge bean statue, the Cloud Gate. She'll know it's him if he says the word Jupiter. So she heads home. Although Jason and Charlie, they're not home yet because they're still at Chicago University and they're still trying to avoid this random new Jason. It gets so bad that Jason B turns to Charlie and says, "Grab the car and meet me at this location. Don't ask any questions. I'll explain later." Because Jason B knows that he can't let Charlie see that there's another one of him running around. So Jason B is able to lure this guy into a desolate part of the university. He tackles him in a bathroom and he chokes him out. And it's unclear if he's dead or not, but he just positions him in the stall and locks it, and then he heads home. Jason B is starting to realize that he can't stay in Chicago anymore. He's got to do something. So when he heads home, he tells Daniela, "Pack a bag, we got to get out of here." And Daniela, knowing full well that that is not her husband, is clearly showing signs of doubt. She's trying to play it off like she's going to go along with this, grab a bag, ask no questions. But all the while, what she's actually doing is trying to get in touch with Charlie to let him know that they're in danger, they got to get out of there. She's finally able to make her grand escape when she tells Jason B that she has to head down to the basement to grab a bag, she needs his help, and then she pushes him down the stairs, locks the door, gets in the car, and her and Charlie start to head off. But they're cut off by Jason. And Daniela, thinking that it's Jason A, tells Charlie, "Get in the car," but it's not Jason A. He starts giving the same spiel to Daniela that Jason A gave her in the police precinct. That's when Daniela knows, this ain't our guy. But as this random Jason is trying to explain everything that Daniela already knows at this point, he gets to an accident. The car gets T-boned, and the car gets T-boned by yet another Jason. A little shell-shocked, Daniela sticks to the plan. She runs with Charlie to Millennium Park, and she sees Jason A. He gives her the code word, which is Jupiter, and Jason A gives Charlie a giant hug because they're back to being reunited. And in the season finale, as Jason A and Daniela and Charlie are reunited back at their house, Jason C, the guy that Jason A met in the bar, has found Jason B. and he's demanding answers, but Jason B doesn't really have any answers. All he knows is that Daniela found out and she pushed him down the stairs. But that doesn't mean Jason C isn't going to continue searching for Daniela, and Jason A knows that. He, Daniela, Charlie, they get in a car and they just drive away. As they're heading away from Chicago, though, both Daniela and Charlie are getting text messages from numbers that they don't know, just begging them to stop, come back. They're not with the real Jason. These are texts coming from other Jasons, trying to reach out. But Danielle and Charlie, they just ignore them because they feel like they're with the real Jason. The problem becomes where to go, because any place that Jason thinks of, they're going to be able to think of it too. They need a place that Jason doesn't know about. And Charlie has that place. One of his buddies, he's kind of rich. They used to throw parties at this house. Charlie knows that it's going to be empty and they can just sneak in because he has the code. And that's exactly what they're looking for, a place like that. Now, technically, this is breaking and entering, and they're not going to be able to stay forever. But for the moment, it's a perfect spot to lay low and formulate a plan. When the dust kind of settles, though, and they both get settled in this house, both Daniela and Charlie are a little bit shell-shocked. They, along with Jason, know that their lives are never going to be the same after this. In the middle of the night, Jason can't sleep, so he decides to go check his email. As you can imagine, there are a ton of emails that he's never seen before, but there's also a folder titled Entanglement, and he's not the one who put it there, so he clicks it. There's only one email in it, and it says, "Welcome home to the real Jason Desson," with a link, and the link is to a chat room. When Jason A clicks that link, he finds out the chat room is filled with all the other Jasons, and there's probably about 100 of them. All of them claiming to be the real Jason, but all of them kind of talking about where Daniela is, where Charlie is, how to get to him. It's like they're working as a team, but they're also not working as a team. They're working as individuals. And as Jason A is looking through all of this, he's getting private messages from other Jasons with the same thing. All saying, "Hey, do you want to partner with me? We could team up and take out the others." But because it's all the same person, this is going to everybody. All of them are receiving it, and all of them are getting it. What this does, though, is give Jason A an idea of just how many Jasons are out there. And he never, in a million years, would have thought it was this many. The next morning when Jason A wakes up, he faces a very, very conflicted and confused Daniela. She's starting to realize at this point that she kind of sort of cheated on her husband, but it was with himself. She starts talking to Jason A about how different this other Jason was, how good he made her feel. And Jason A understands. He starts explaining what led Jason B to his world. He can understand that, especially after all he went through to get back to his Daniela. He then starts talking to her about all the other Danielas he met throughout his travels and how different they were from his own. Eventually, the conversation does end up going into the fact that there are about 100 Jasons running around, all thinking that they're Daniela's Jason. The crazy scenarios and bargaining that they've done to try to figure out who ends up with Daniela and Charlie. One such thing being they can just trade off, kind of do a shared parenting custody battle thing. As those two chit-chat, back at their actual house, Jason C is still trying to figure out where they are. He checks the bank records and there's nothing, and he knows that a predictable location isn't going to fly. It's too easy, so it's got to be an unpredictable place. He grabs a cell phone that was allegedly taken from him, and he notices a text from Blair asking for her car back. And he figures out that Jason A has Blair's car, so wherever Blair's car is, Jason A is, but more importantly, so is Daniela and Charlie. Now he just has to figure out if Blair has like a tracking device on that vehicle. So he texts her and asks her to come over. And as he waits, he decides to torture Jason B a little bit. First, he tells him what happened with Amanda, at least the Amanda that he had with him. She died. And when Jason B hears that, he's pretty devastated. Jason B also feels really bad about what he did, because he truly believed that he was sending Jason to a better world, to a world that he would have wanted, a life that he would have wanted. He never thought about the fact that he was taking Jason away from a life that he actually liked. He just thought he was giving him an upgrade. Now he realizes it's far from that. A little while later, Blair does eventually come over, but she's greeted by nobody at the door. She stumbles in the house, she stumbles upstairs, and that's where she finds Jason B tied up in the closet, and she's freaked out. She's even more freaked out when Jason C comes around the corner. First thing he does is admit, this is strange. I understand that. But for Daniella's sake, I need you to do something for me. I need you to track your car's location if you can. And Blair can, she just doesn't want to. She's too freaked out. That's when Jason C. pulls a gun on her, but Blair is able to get it away from him when she maces him right in the face. With a gun pointed at both Jasons, she demands to know what the hell is going on. Once they do explain it, Blair ends up giving the location of Daniela because she wants to help out her friend. But Daniela, Charlie, Jason A., they're unaware. They're kind of just playing catch up a little bit. Daniela getting reacquainted with her husband and realizing, yes, this is the man that I love. And that night, she actually signs onto the message board and lets all of them know, I've chosen, and it's none of you. So please respect that decision. Daniela hopes that this will put an end to the constant barrage of Jasons coming and trying to track them down and convince her to go with them. Unfortunately, it doesn't. When Blair gave up the location of Daniela, Jason B headed to the house, but he had no idea that one of the Jasons put a tracking device on the Honda that he drives, which attracted all of the Jasons to that house. So the house that they're currently in is flooded with Jasons, all trying to get to Daniela, all trying to get to Charlie. At first, Jason A is trying to fight them off, but he's actually saved by Jason B, who at this point has done a complete 180 and needs to make good on all the mistakes that he made. He fights off a couple of the other Jasons, throws Jason A the keys, apologizes for everything he did, and then says, take my car and get them to safety. The last thing he does is give Jason A his wedding ring back. They're still not out of the woods, though. When they're driving off, they're getting shot at. They're literally hitting other Jasons trying to flee. But they do eventually end up getting away from the house. The problem is they don't know what to do next. As they're trying to formulate some kind of plan on where they can go, Charlie notices that Jason B left them something, and that something is a box full of the serums. He also left a cell phone recording trying to explain his actions. He tells Daniela that when he entered that box, he was filled with regret, but then one day he entered a world and he found a family. That family had been created through a choice that he was too scared to make. At first, he was just envious, and he thought it was all about Daniela. But then he realized that the thing he wanted most were just the decisions that Jason A had made. And the biggest one being that he allowed space in his life for somebody else's dreams and needs. He goes on to say that there's no apology sufficient to explain what he's done, or justify it for that matter. He just hopes that they can find a new home where they can be safe. Jason A knows exactly what he has to do. He drives to the location of the box, but he's greeted there by a bunch of the Jasons. Amazingly, though, they're not there to fight him. No, they're actually just there to say goodbye to Daniela and Charlie. They respect Daniela's decision. They just wanted to be there to see them off. And with a bunch of Jasons watching, Jason A, Charlie, and Daniela get in the box and they try to find a new home. And that is the end of Season 1 of Dark Matter. Thank you so much for getting this part of the recap. I really appreciate it. Consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you like this. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought this sucked. I'm sure somewhere out there, Pat B is a much better recapper than me. But unfortunately, in this world, you're stuck with Pat A. So, sorry about that. Go buy a mug. Go buy a shirt. I got merch and I got bills. And I recently got laid off, and that sucks. So, help a guy out by just, buying stuff. And if this show gets picked up for Season 2, I'll be right back here.